Edgar Wright's a pretty good director, to say the least. If you haven't heard of him, go check out these movies. After hitting it big with Shaun of the Dead, the revered rom-com, Wright made 2 more feature films following the same ultra-stylized genre movie format to create the renowned Three Flavors Cornetto trilogy. And while all of these 3 films undoubtedly have their merits, the best one in my opinion is Hot Fuzz. And this movie, by all intents and purposes, shouldn't work. It should be an absolute mess. Why, you say? Well, to start off with, since it is a parody, it has to balance comedy with the genre that it is parodying, without having the parody aspect becoming tiring or stale for the audience. To add on to this, Wright decided to add aspects of 2 more genres in mystery and horror just for kicks. Also, the budget was £8 million, or around $11 million, which, for a movie that's trying to do action well, isn't a substantial amount. Just to put that into perspective, this Captain America movie that I'm sure none of you know exists because I didn't know it existed, had the same exact budget. Oh yeah, and this dumpster fire had $175 million to work with. The movie's plot is also a bit insane, and if you haven't seen it, I'm sorry, but I'm about to spoil the hell out of it, and you should probably still go watch it because the movie is so much more than its plot. Okay, so let's do this. Simon Pegg's character, Nicholas Angel, is restationed from London to a small village named Sandford because he's too good at his job and his colleagues are jealous. After a beautiful travel montage, he arrives at a village that regularly wins Village of the Year and partners up with the lazy and incompetent but charming Danny Butterman, played by Nick Frost, who's an avid fan of buddy cop films and thinks everything Angel does mirrors the movies.
Super cop. Meet the cop that can't be stopped.
Angel gets accustomed to the quirky townsfolk who govern themselves under the Neighborhood Watch Association. You know, the NWA. Eventually, people start dying in accidents around town, but Nick believes it's a conspiracy involving a property deal between the murder victims and tries to get to the bottom of things. Eventually, Nick finds out that these accidental deaths are indeed murders committed by a shop owner, Simon Skinner. He later finds out that the true culprit was the NWA, meaning not only Skinner, but essentially the entire town was behind all of the death. In the confrontation with Nick, Skinner tells him that the motive behind the murders were way less complicated than he originally thought. A guy wasn't killed for a property deal, he was killed because his house was tacky.
And George Merchant? He had an awful house.
That woman wasn't killed in a real estate scam, she just had an annoying laugh.
And so Eve deserved to die too?
Oh, she did have a very annoying laugh.
The movie ends in a whole shootout and Nick and Danny save the day, blah 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 blah. The point is, this movie is absurd. The plot is absurd. The genres are absurd. The situations are absurd. So why doesn't it suck? It's because it embraces this absurdity. A journalist dies because he misspells something and it's played for laughs.
Our once great paper had become riddled with tabloid journalism, not to mention persistent errors.
You listed her age as 55.
Well, actually, I'm 53.
53.
What?
Yes, the movie is crazy, but that's the point. Hot Fuzz is one of the most beautifully self-aware movies I've ever seen because it knows exactly what it is at its core, a comedy. You never see one genre overtake another or the film take itself too seriously, because that isn't the intended purpose. Wright goes in with a clear vision and executes masterfully. The stupid amount of genres doesn't matter because each genre convention is used under a consistently comedic tone in order to not only parody the genres, but celebrate each one while undeniably remaining a comedy. Wright masterfully uses transitions that hysterically last just a bit too long, and he subverts expectations constantly by using music, editing, and camera movements. Take a look at this scene.
Found him.
You found him? And what is this?
Sea mine.
Sea mine.
Well, Mr. Webley, this is an extremely dangerous collection. It's a wonder nobody's been hurt before.
Nah, just a lot of junk.
The writing also builds up consistent characters and manages to create one of the tightest scripts I've ever seen. No line is wasted in this film. Almost every bit of dialogue is a joke or set up for a future joke. It's like Arrested Development in movie form.
Is it true that there is a place in a man's head that if you shoot it, it will blow up?
Because of all these comedic factors, the movie has a unified tone. This is something that a movie like Bridesmaids struggles with. When you try to have absurd humor for 99% of the movie, but try to take yourself seriously for the other 1%, it's a bit jarring for the audience. While Hot Fuzz isn't absurd for the entire runtime, as this would definitely get tiring, its more serious parts don't feel forced, and everything that happens still feels appropriate for the situation and for the characters. Just because the movie is self-aware and doesn't take itself too seriously, doesn't mean, however, that there isn't any substance. Again, you can have an implicit message for your audience without being sappy or beating them over the head with it. The movie praises cops. This doesn't become social commentary until the middle of the next decade, so I won't try to politicize this loaded matter. But by glorifying paperwork and due diligence before convictions, and satirizing some of the more mundane things that cops do, Wright emphasizes the process of keeping the peace and outlines the intention that a lot of police officers have. The protagonists never kill the bad guys by presuming their guilt in this movie. Not a single cop kills someone. Hot Fuzz manages to poke fun at itself, other movies, and the action and mystery genres as a whole, while avoiding becoming messy or inconsistent. Movies generally work really well when they know what they are. Even those that aren't that great objectively as films end up being fairly enjoyable when they're self-aware. For me, Hot Fuzz is up there with Lebowski and Airplane as one of the greatest parodies ever made, and it's one of my favorite movies ever too. If you haven't seen it, well, I kinda spoiled the whole thing, but you should still give it a shot.